Hey everybody, welcome back to another box office report. We are just entering now November. As this recording, it is November 1st, so the Halloween season is now officially over. We're now heading into Thanksgiving, and of course, also just the nature of just people. We're already technically in the Christmas season just because people want to promote Christmas a month or so out. It's just sad, Thanksgiving gets no love. But October is officially wrapped, so we are now going to be recapping October, and there were quite a few films actually, big and small, that got released. So we'll be examining those today. And yeah, so let's get into this. So before we get into it, as we always do, before we get into individual box office recaps, I want to discuss how I measure box office. So this has changed since the last box office recap because now I have been taking more into consideration the ticket sales. The 50% cuts, or depending on the markets that they're in. Now that is a part of the equation as well. So, but everything else still applies. So the 2 times, 2.5, and 3 times ratios are the higher margins that I believe that these individual investments need to make, and that's what I believe the company's expectations would be for these movies as well. But bare minimum, usually these films would need to do 2 times whatever it is their investments are. I also include any publicly known marketing expenses, so that could be anything revolving like reshoots, marketing itself, or anything else that attributed to the investment getting higher, or as an individual expense. So that, and also as I've now illustrated, we are excuse me, excuse me. We are also including also. Sorry, that cough just came out of nowhere. Excuse me. We're going to be also including 50 to 50 ticket sales. Usually that's how it is with ticket sales. Usually in the general box office revenue. Now, individual markets, that's a different story. Typically, domestically, it's like 50, 55%. Internationally, it's like 40%. So it's, different in different markets. But typically, also, the first few days for a film's release, it's usually a little bit it's more swayed towards studios, like 70-30, but eventually it wills its way down to 50%. So we'll be including that as well as the consideration of what that film would have to do on streaming or anywhere else to make up for the bare minimum of that investment, the difference of whatever they didn't make in theaters. So hopefully that all makes sense. That's a lot of information. So hopefully that is consumable as we roll into looking at October. And October was, yeah, October was not great. I'll be flashing up some images right here real quick just so you get an illustration of how October went. It was bad. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It was just bad. It was the worst performing October in many, many years. And we'll explain a little bit why at the end of this video, why that might have been the case. But we're going to get down into talking about the individual films themselves. So let's get started. So the first of which we're going to discuss is The Smashing Machine, which was Dwayne Johnson's kind of big dramatic debut. Supposedly he's done other dramatic work previously, but this is kind of his big test in that field. Distributed through A24, was released on October 3rd, and yeah, so as you can see, theatrically, it made about so far $19.75 million. And when you do the math, when you actually look at the domestic sales, the markets there, the kind of cuts that are getting from there, international sales from that end as well, the Studio A24 so far has made about at least 9.03 million or $9.6 million off of the Smashing Machine, at least if my math checks out. And this had a budget of $50 million, no marketing expenses known. So just as an investment, as we know, it's about $50 million. So bare minimum, the film would have needed to have done at least $100 million. And the higher margins the company would want this film to do is $125 million. And obviously, that is not happening at all. Streaming will not help at all. No other form of release is going to help it at all. This is pretty much when it came out, it was pretty much a dead film. It was the lowest performing film in Dwayne Johnson's career, which is very unfortunate because I actually thought he did a decent job in this film. I thought film wise it was also fair. Um, so just very unfortunate. I think it's just purely by what it is. I think it's also because of a lack of marketing. I think that there was just not a lot of word of mouth that came from the film. So I think it was just a more or less uh, uh, a deflated release. Just nobody really seemed to care. It didn't stem from purely that of like marketing or purely of this and that. I think it just really was just people just fundamentally not giving a shit. So so yeah, this was a huge failure. He's supposedly still going to be going for more dramatic work, which I mean, I do hope he does. I mean, I do want him to, still, you know, push himself. I don't want him to keep doing the same stuff over and over again, like some people. Um, I will out myself on that. Um, but yeah, so I hopefully he gets to do more work like this because I think he was decent in this. But clearly not a good start for what is supposed to be a different change of pace for his career. So next film we're going to look at is Anamani. I know this is kind of unfair to bring up because this ultimately got pulled from theaters because theatrically it only grossed 1.16 million, and I'm always like keeping tabs on box office, and that number never changed for like the next like 2 or 3 weeks after it came out. So I'm led to believe that it eventually got pulled from theaters, and well, given how much it's done and how much the studio probably benefited from it, which in this case was Universal, you can see why. Studio wise, if my math checks out, they only benefited about $58,000 or $63,800 off of this release. And there's no disclosure of any production to it, but I'm inclined to believe it was maybe like 10 million, and so higher margins at least 30. Break even point would be at least 20 million. So this was a failure in and of itself, and critically it was also a bit mixed bag. So it wasn't a high profile piece. I mean, obviously you have Daniel Day Lewis at the center of it, but it's not a selling point. Actors don't typically sell film. Look at Dwayne Johnson with the Smashing Machine. Like it just doesn't. Actors don't sell products. And I know in the case of the Smashing Machine, it's a different thing for him. But the fact of the matter is that the argument is that if an actor can sell something, it's not necessarily them being in a certain role. It should be that, oh, that actor I would want to see. In this case, both these cases, you have two notable names, and people just didn't care to check these films out for very specific reasons in that. So yeah, this got pulled just because nobody went to see it, and at that, literally, like you see the numbers, it's just yeah, it really did not go anywhere. It might be a little bit less than what I'm thinking based on production, might be like 5 million or so, but even then, it's like yeah. So yeah, this did not do great. This did not do great, and I highly doubt that anyone's gonna give a crap when it comes out on streaming. So yeah, that's two failures so far. Now, the first shining point actually in the month actually came from Good Boy. Good Boy was theatrically did about 7.86 million, and studio wise, which in this case was Shutter, they benefited from at least 3.33 million or 3.66 million dollars. And budget wise, as far as I've read, only $750,000. So higher margins and break even point, at least sitting around 1.5 million. So this did very well for them. Surprisingly so, because there wasn't a whole lot of marketing attached to it. It was just one trailer, and that was basically it. So This might be attributed to a lack of horror that came out this month. I don't know what it is about October, but there's always just a real lack of variety in horror. In this case, October there was like three horrors that came out, but only about only one of them really was high profile. The other two that we'll get into were not that high profile. So so this might be the case of the internet. Might and also purely by production, it did not need to do that much. So I think based on that alone, based on probably the reception that probably was from the trailer, and also based on just the really the small amount of that went into its budget, I think that's what really benefited it quite a bit. So good job on Good Boy. Uh, Man, it didn't look all that great to me. I just thought it looked very gimmicky, but it seemed like some of you cared to check it out and benefited quite a bit as a result. So now, arguably one of the biggest flops of the month, maybe the biggest one, because once we get down this list, you'll see like how many failures there were compared to successes. At least we'll say the most high-profile thing that came out this month was Tron Ares. Now, originally, Mortal Kombat 2 was supposed to come out this month, but they delayed it for really odd reasons. So Tron Ares takes center stage now for October, and judging by the theatrical gross being 126.03 million, and when you do the math, studio-wise, Disney benefited about 56.98 million, or roughly 60.26 million, like as high as that number can get, depending on the cuts, domestically, because it could be 50 or 55%. And then you go over to look at its budget, which is 180 million. Marketing wise, probably an additional 100 million. Investment wise, sitting at 280, so break even point 560 million. And the higher margins probably like 840. So this is a failure. This is a failure. No two ways about it. Yeah. I think that this is pretty easy. I mean, I think it's just by what it is, by IP. I just don't know who was really craving another Tron film. I think some other people were saying this as well. Some other people on like Deadline, like actual people in Hollywood, were saying the exact same thing. Like, who was craving another Tron film? You know, I think that what Disney was probably betting on was aesthetic. I think that they were hoping that that was going to be a swaying factor for people to come see this, and clearly that wasn't the case. Very clearly so. Um, and it just adds to the pile of just stuff that Disney's not. Disney's just had a rough year this year. We talked about it in a video a few days ago. Just Disney's just been not bringing it this year. Um, and it gets worse because they had another release this month, and yeah, so I heard that this is losing about 130 million for Disney. That number might be a little bit higher, honestly, given just where we're at right now. So yeah, I just think this was a weird business decision. I just don't know who was craving another Tron film at this point, or at least in like major, because the last film didn't do great either. Tron Legacy. When you go look at the box office there, that didn't do well either. So it really is doubtful in terms of why they made this, or why they chose to move forward with another one. So I think it's purely to do with aesthetic. I think that that's what they were thinking would be the driving factor here, but no, did not did not benefit did not benefit at all. So coming out the same weekend as Tron Ares was Roofman. This was the Channing Tatum film, the one where he was trapped when he was played a criminal who was hiding at Toys R Us, something like that. Um, so far, theatrically, it's grossed about 27.47 million. And when you do the math, studio-wise, in this case, Paramount benefited about 13.03 million, or as high as 14.06 million dollars. And given the production being 19 million, as far as I know, as high as 19 million, no marketing costs attached to it, so 19 million as it stands. Break even point 38 million. Higher margin wise 47.5 million. Yeah. Not great, not great. Um, I think this is I think this is the victim of release. Putting it up against a major temple like Tron, even though, as we illustrated, Tron is not a major franchise, but just by design, what people are gonna probably seek out more. That probably wasn't a smart move. Um, Lack of marketing, also, I don't remember seeing a whole lot of marketing for this film. Um, so yeah, so I mean, it's small budgeted, so it doesn't have to do too much. But I seriously doubt on streaming that it's gonna benefit too much. So yeah, I think this is just a victim, or just like I said, a victim of release, and also just by marketing, and just by just what it is. I mean, it's just very ordinary. Doesn't have a lot of distinction to it. So, and like I said, I did a video about, just like when this trailer came out, I was just like, why, what is it with these very distinct filmmakers getting into the business of doing such very just, what you call it, like these middle-aged like filmmakers doing like what is essentially uh, like studio films, like these movies, like the way that they're being made. Roofman, what was that film with Austin Butler, like Caught Stealing with Darren Aronofsky? It's like it's just weird. It's just weird, um, and Caught Stealing didn't do great either. Um, so yeah, I just don't think anyone was going to just really cared about this coming out, and the results kind of prove that. I'm going to include this one because just how small it is, and just also giving you a picture of also, small things not necessarily always being financially secure. This is Soul on Fire. This came out from Sony on October 10th, so the same weekend as Tron and Roofman. Theatrically, it grossed $7.02 million so far. And studio wise, once you do the math, 3.51 million or as high as 3.86 million. So production wise, we're looking at $3 million. So we don't know any marketing expenses attached to it. So there wasn't any really, because I didn't hear anything about this. I didn't see any marketing for this really, but 3 million as it stands, and as it stands, higher margins, it would need to be at least, and break even point at least $6 million. I it didn't really do all that well. I mean, it might prove to do okay on streaming. Doubt it though, just because again, this is Sony, so we don't necessarily. I mean, I guess Netflix is where they might end up going, but I don't think that Netflix themselves is really going to like promote it hard. So yeah, so this is a case where small things don't necessarily lead to success. You know, I still say though, for companies, as we'll get into, in the case of Tron and stuff like that, if lowering your cost would benefit a lot more, just because, as you see, the studios only benefit so much when it's all said and done. But in the case of Soul on Fire, no one, they didn't choose to market it, so no one was going to really give a shit to watch. And even though it was a small budget as it was, if you ain't going to market it, no one's going to really show up. And only a handful of people really did. So next up, we have Kiss of the Spider Woman. This was the J-Lo musical, distributed through Lionsgate. And as you can see, theatrically, only grossed $1.63 million. Yeah. And studio gross, once you do the math, roughly $87,588, or $95,638. Yeah, production, as you can see, was about 34 million. Investment sitting at 34 million. We don't know any marketing expenses attached to it. Break even point 68 million, and then the higher margins for this film would be like at 85 million. So This was a big failure for Lionsgate. Just adding to the pile for Lionsgate, and you can understand more so why Lionsgate is potentially getting bought out by someone else in the future. I forget who it is, but yeah, man. I think this is another case of lack of marketing because I just do not recall any marketing for this at all. Um, yeah, and yeah, I mean, I think I heard it got like decent reception, but again, nobody probably knew about it because there was no marketing out there. So yeah, so big failure for Lionsgate, and you know, just for J Lo's case as well, it's like I don't know where her career has gone in terms of act. She's never really had a career in acting, really. I mean, she had that one film that people seem to gravitate towards, which was Hustlers, I think, a few years back, where she plays like a stripper, uh, which given the appeal of J Lo, is it's not it's not out of her league. Let's just put it that way. um, but it's not out of her wheelhouse. Still she was good in that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be misogynistic, but I'm just saying like it's not completely it's not completely distinct. This was probably more distinct for her, more out of her wheelhouse. In the case of like Dwayne Johnson, you know him from a certain flair and him subverting the expectation with this Smashing Machine. This is subverting the expectation of what you expect at J Lo, kind of, sorta, because it's musical and she's saying this stuff. I guess there's something to it, but you know what I'm trying to say. There's a little bit of shades of difference, when it comes to this. And I heard she's okay in it, so but nobody seemed to care because Lionsgate did not give a shit about marketing it. So, so yeah, adds to the pile for Lionsgate and more validity to the claim that Lionsgate probably will dissolve in the future or just become someone will become a part of someone else's company because on their own they are bleeding and they desperately need help. So. Next film we're going to be looking at is After the Hunt. I wanted to see this, but I never got around to seeing it. And I figured it's going to come out on Amazon eventually, so I'm just going to wait until then. Um, and yeah, this is distributed through Amazon. So Amazon, at least if you've been following this channel and seeing my thoughts on Amazon. It doesn't matter how it does in theaters. What matters is how it does on streaming. That's how they presented their case when it came to Red One. So with that, it should not bother them at all that theatrically the film made about $7.89 million. In Amazon's case, they got about at least 3.46 million or $3.62 million off of that theatrical gross. It shouldn't bother them at all that also the budget was around $70 to $80 million. So we don't know the marketing expenses on top of that. So bare minimum, I forgot to actually change that higher margins thing. My bad. Um, the break even point for this would be at least 140 to 160, or the higher margins they would need to hit were 175 $200 million. So it should not bother Amazon at all because it obviously is going to crush on streaming. Because obviously, if that's how it's doing in theaters, it's just going to crush on streaming. It's going to do the hundreds of millions of dollars that it needs to make up. So, yeah, so it shouldn't bother them at all. So we should probably just move on from this because this is not going to bother them at all, right? So let's just move on from that. Next film we're going to be looking at is Black Phone 2. This was the major horror release that came out this month. And so far, theatrically, done about 88.97 million. I saw on Wikipedia, I guess it's gone up to like 90 or so, but I'm going by what I saw on Box Office Mojo. So 88.97 million. And when you do the math, Universal, who's the distributor on this, benefited from at least 41.17 million or as high as $43.96 million so far off of its theatrical gross. Now, production wise, we're looking at 30 million. We don't know the marketing expenses attached to this. So about 30 million in terms of an investment. Break even point on this, about 60 million. Higher margins on this would need to be about 75 million. So on paper, theatrical gross, it looks like it's done really, really well. But as far as how much the studio has benefited off the movie, they are getting close to that break-even point. So I think at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, this will probably wind up close to that 60 million. And then once you also put it out on streaming, in their case, I think it'd be a Peacock. Um, I think that they're going to end up doing fine. So, I don't think it's a massive, massive success at the end of the day, as much as some people might label it so. Because remember, studios will talk about films based on raw gross, but they won't necessarily tell you what they benefited from off the movie. So, in that aspect, it is a success. But in this aspect, which is the real, real shit, um, it's going to end up doing good, but it's not going to end up doing great. So this is another good one. Uh, two horrors from October, the only two films so far that have done well. So yeah, so Black Phone 2 did well. So maybe expect a Black Phone 3 in the future, but that remains to be seen. Next one we're going to be looking at is Good Fortune. This came out the same weekend as Black Phone 2, another film from Lionsgate. This is the Keanu Reeves Angel comedy. I was kind of curious about seeing this, but then I ultimately talked myself out of it. Um, Theatrical gross so far, we're looking at 14.4 million, and then studio gross wise, when you break it down, Lionsgate benefited about potentially 7.08 million or 7.74 million dollars. And just to say at this point, also, my math may not fully check out, so just if I'm missing something or if my math is wrong, let me know. I was not great at math when I was growing up, so just an FYI. Um, but yes, production wise has the same production as Black Phone 2 does, 30 million. No publicly no marketing expenses, so break even point on this would need to be about 60 million. Higher margins again 75 million. Clearly not going to be the case. Clearly not going to be the case at all. Again, just adding to the pile of just Lionsgate's failures compared to their successes. Have they had a success this year? I don't think they've had one. I'm trying to think because Strangers Chapter 2, I think, might have done something for them. I feel like there's like one that I'm missing, but yeah, it's been really rough for the studio, and again, it just further demonstrates why they are being probably going to get bought out soon by another company because they're just not working. They're just not working. So, in the case of this film, I think this is more to do by just release. Again, Black Phone 2 coming out, and you know, more of an appealing factor, I think, Black Phone 2, because Halloween season, you're going to want to go out and see something scary. In the case of Good Fortune, this feels like something that should have came out this month in November, which is another film that I'll also bring up down the line. I feel is similar for, but yeah, in this case, I just feel like it was just bad timing. Like just putting it against a horror in the month of horror, I just feel was not great, not great planning. So yeah, so yeah, so it's just rough being Lionsgate right now. Just it really really is. So all right, next one we're going to look at is Shelby Oaks. This is Chris Stuckman's feature debut, the YouTuber that you guys may be familiar with, the film critic, um, the one who cannot also talk shit about film anymore because he wants to get good with the business. So, which is a bit unfortunate. Um, but he has a feature that came out, and production is a little bit of a mystery because looking into it, his Kickstarter made about $1 million. But then Neon came on board and they allowed him to do additional photography and reshoots. So that was about an additional 1 million. But I also read that a producer on this film disputed some of these claims, saying that the Kickstarter was not as high as some people were reporting. So as it stands, I'm going by the assumption that it might be around 1.5 million as a whole, given the additional funds given by Neon and what they made off of Kickstarter. I'm going to say at least like 1.5 million is some happy medium. So with that, we don't know any marketing expenses attached to this. The film would need to have done break even at least 3 million, higher margins 3.75 million. So, or just 3 million, just generally. So, but yeah, theatrical gross, we're looking at 3.29 million. So as it stands, it looks like it did well. But again, that's not what Neon benefits from. And Neon, it has a financial aspect to this because they are giving this filmmaker about $1 million, so they have a stake in it. So they have to be able to benefit it in some way. So studio-wise, they benefited about 1.63 million to 1.79 million dollars. So the studio might in fact be happy. The studio may in fact be happy because they only attributed about at least $1 million. So they in fact might be happy on their end, and that's how they might paint this as a quote unquote success. But in the case of the filmmaker, they did not collect the funds that they made off Kickstarter. They didn't make that money back. So yeah, so just general overall investment with the Kickstarter, with the studio involvement, this is not a great start for him as a filmmaker. So in the case of the studios, they're probably happy because they only had to put in so much for the film. But for the filmmaker and overall for what his film needed to do as a whole, it didn't do great. So he probably is good with the studios. I mean, just regardless, he's bending the knee anyway, just because he's not going to, be honest about how he feels about films and stuff anymore, which is really sad, just because that's just the nature of getting into this business is that you have to keep your lip shut. But just generally speaking, though, the film didn't really do all that great. So. All right, we're on the home stretch. We got 3 more films to look at. So, first of which is Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere. We did a review on this if you guys want to go check that out. Theatrical gross, we're looking at 20.24 million. And this is Disney again. This is 20th Century Studios, but I mean, it's under the Disney umbrella, so it's basically Disney. So studio-wise, Disney, they made about, after you do the math, 9.42 million or 10.07 million dollars. So when you take a look at its production, looking at 55 million, no publicly known marketing expenses. So break-even point for this would have to be 110 million, higher margins 137.5 million dollars. So again, another failure for Disney. In this case, I think it has a lot to do with just what it is. We're talking Bruce Springsteen. I know he's known, but he's not as known. He's not as known as say like a Michael Jackson or Freddie Mercury. He's not as he's not as notable of a name. In that way. So there's that. And generally, the film got okay reception as well, but I think it's more or less to do with just what it is. I just think people really are not as hot as like the other names I had mentioned, like a Michael Jackson or Freddie Mercury, or an Elton John. Those kind of names. Those names are ingrained into the culture. People know those names and value those names. Bruce Springsteen is a very specific kind of audience. So in that, and also the film is attacking a very specific album, in a very specific setting, so it's very specific, and that those distinctions are ultimately what's going to alienate also a couple of people as well. So by design and by what it is, I think is what ultimately kind of killed it. So. Next film we're going to look at is Regretting You, which is a very ironic title given how it is performed. Theatrical gross on this, we're looking at 31.92 million, and the studio for this, Paramount, benefited about at least 14.83 million or 15.86 million dollars, depending on again cuts from the domestic market and other markets. Production on this was about 30 million, so no publicly known marketing expenses. So break even point on this about 60 million, higher margins about 75 million. This did not do well at all. So I think this is again a case similar to Good Fortune, where I think this probably should have came out in November. I don't think that being so close to the Halloween season, or being so close to Halloween, didn't help. Um, Also, by design, what the film is, it's a very hard sell for a lot of people. Young adult type things. It's just it's such a hard market. Not a whole lot of people are going to care. Um, I know they're trying to market the author behind this. It Ends With Us, but It Ends With Us had different things going for it. With this, it just was not really that much of a selling point. So at least the actor here, Mason Thames, at least he has Black Phone 2 to hold himself for, but for it's ironic given the title. Um, so yeah, so I just think that this was just a niche audience, and also I just think bad timing. I think this should have came out in November, more or less dumped in November, or hell, dump this in January, because I just don't know who was going to care to check this out in a major way. So, especially given what's coming out this month of Zootopia, it's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I just think that just there just wasn't a whole lot that was going to come out of this, regardless, if you ask me. So. And last but not least, we have Begonia. Now, I will be checking this out. Hopefully, in the next video, I'll have a review out for you. Now, this just came out, so we don't have final numbers yet for the entire weekend. I'm recording this on Saturday, but so far theatrically, I mean, just where we're at, I think it's worth bringing up. Regardless, this came out on Halloween, and this had a theatrical gross so far of 3.86 million. And I've heard that by the end of the weekend, we're looking at maybe $5 million. So studio gross so far, Universal in this case, about 1.82 million or 1.96 million. Production, as far as I read, according to Deadline, is sitting around $45 million. No marketing expenses for this. So break even point on this would be at least 90 million. Higher margins for this would be at least $112.5 million. Clearly not going to happen. I think this is purely a case of uh, just people not wanting to see this. I know that people online will have their own views about it. Online community is not the same thing as general audience members. So it may seem that people online film communities might be discussing this, and the perception of that may be, oh well, people are probably going out to see this. That's a very, very small market, compared to just general audience members, where if they see something like this, which is which is uh, being offbeat and odd, it's something that is not usually attractive to mainstream audiences or just audiences in general. So I mean, I'm interested in it because I like that kind of stuff. So it appeals to me, but what also appeals to me, I recognize also is very alienating to lots of people. So in the case of Begonia, it was going to alienate a lot of people regardless. So yeah, I just think that they were hoping that someday that Emma Stone would regenerate that Poor Things financial success. And this is now one for three, one for two, because kinds of kindness didn't work, and this didn't work either. So yeah, it's just weird. That's why people didn't want to see it. It's just because audiences think it's weird. So if you were counting, that was about 14 films that we talked about here. And when we go looking into the successes and the failures, Yeah. Yeah. Two successes, oddly enough, horror, compared to the 12 that have not done well. This was a bad month. As I said up top at the beginning of this video, it was apparently one of the worst performing October in like the past like 20 years. So, and it only gets worse when you go look at the general box office takes, you know, just comparing successes and failures the entire year so far. This has not been a great year. This has been a pretty rough year. Um, I've been trying to be optimistic. I've also been reevaluating. So if you see like maybe an inconsistency from the last video, I'm just reevaluating now that I'm considering the 50/50 um, aspect, you know, within ticket sales. So I'm just reevaluating on that aspect. And I just realized that I didn't get rid of the italicized stuff. But anyways, and I also included little things like Blue Moon, which came out, which is like that Ethan Hawke film with Richard Linklater directing. That didn't do well at all either. I didn't really bring it up just because it wasn't a major release, um, but well, I didn't. I was just being lazy. I'll just be frank. Um, so really, it was 13 failures compared to the two that did well. But regardless, October this month and generally this year so far, it's been bad. It's been pretty bad. So yeah, forgive me if it's a little dark. It's just my kitty is sleeping. I really don't want to turn on a light because I want her to have some nice shut eye. But the dark setting might be illustrative also, just given how October's gone. So and this year, but yeah, we're on the home stretch now for 2025. We have 2 more months. We have November and December. And like I said, I think that these next few months are going to be a little bit of a turnaround period for some companies, Disney specifically, because we have Zootopia 2 coming out. We have Avatar coming out. So, you know, we have other things from other studios, Five Nights at Freddy's 2, SpongeBob movie, you know, so I think that there's going to be some saving graces at the end of the year. But generally, though, this year has been a bust. It's been a bust. It's not been good at all. And you know, I wish I could be optimistic, but it's just it's pretty damning. So yeah, you guys, what are your thoughts on October? What films did you check out in October? Be curious to know. And how do you guys think that the next 2 months are going to unfold? Like I said, I think there's going to be some saving graces here and there, but generally, as the months go, it might just continue this really sad streak. Um, but let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below, and thank you for sticking around for this. Is I know a long video, so thank you guys for sticking around. If you guys have watched it all the way through. But let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.